What's up, y'all? Your eyes and ears don't lie. Coming with you down this path of destruction, even though we are unwilling passengers, unwitting, but we just stuck all going through it. And one thing that's really been discussed and mentioned by a lot of people is the tax breaks and how the changes he made with the taxes are going to really put a lot of money back in Americans' pockets. The wealthiest of the wealthy are going to get more money back in their pockets. Some of these deductions and things that he's established, a lot of them are income-based, and it's a facade where a lot of you guys think that, like the example I'll use, they see this tax deduction on auto loan. Okay, well, when you look at auto loans, interest rates for loans are driven by a few factors, mainly the national debt, which has a lot to do with it because it makes you high risk when you owe a lot of money. So why did he say that you can write off up to $10,000 of auto loan debt for interest? That's because he knows that since you're going to add almost $4 trillion to the debt, interest rates are going to skyrocket. So you're going to have to pay more for any type of loan as a result of our increasing debt. So you can write off up to $10,000, but the caveat is you only get $10,000 if your car costs $100 grand or more. So middle class and average people, they're not buying $100,000 cars. So it's tiered as far as what you can write off below that, and they're setting standards on you got to spend a certain amount of money to get some of it. So the lower the price of the car, the less you get, but you're still paying that high interest rate. So you're not really winning from the standpoint that people are talking, like they're throwing up what you get to write off that. They're throwing up in Social Security that you're going to be able to take a $6,000 deduction. Okay, that's also tiered. So $6,000 for individuals, $12,000 for married couples filing jointly. But that also depends on the amount of money that you make. So yes, it's capped at $75,000 for individuals and $150 for married couples. But the majority of the population, depending on what state you're in and your age and other varying factors, you're not going to make enough to even claim the deduction. So you fall below the threshold to where you get anything. Because if you look at what the average stuff is for what people make in Social Security, you're not even going to qualify for that. So it's, congratulations, you won the trophy. But you ain't never going to get it. Versus the taxes that you're going to pay on your Social Security is still robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you have to understand that for everything that he tells you he's doing in this, there's a negative result of it. There's not one positive thing that was added to this that is going to, in the long run, put more money back in the public's pocket. And this idea that he says that tariffs, we're going to be so rich that this is going to make up the difference for everything that we're not collecting. That's outrageous because tariffs are just sharing of cost with the consumers. The government will collect the tariffs. The businesses that paid the tariffs, if the Supreme Court upholds his illegal enforcement of the tariffs, businesses will just pass that on to consumers. That is a fact. You know, what you look at what Walmart's response was to what he said when he said Walmart's going to eat the taxes because the tariffs are a tax. I even hate to say tariff because it is a tax. Walmart, the largest retailer in the United States and one of the largest in the world, they said they weren't going to eat them. They immediately raised prices on their goods. Immediately. And one thing that they did too that's not talked about, you didn't even go through inventory and raise prices on imported goods from China or the countries that have the highest tariffs, taxes, import fees. You raise things in the store wide. So yeah, I may pay more for these Barbie dolls that are made in China, but I'm still going to raise the price on these American goods that are made here because I'm raising the price on everything because it's about profit. Yes, they make billions and they still could be profitable eaten a large portion of the tariffs, but this is not what they're about. This is a capitalistic country where they can never make enough money. They can never be too rich. And that's clear based on how businesses have taken their work and their labor and their manufacturing whenever possible overseas. It wasn't policies. It wasn't cost of doing business. It was the option to make more money. And I hate listening to people talk about the government drove these businesses out. They didn't. Greed drove these businesses out. You look at how they're saying, well, I don't drive an electric car, so I don't care, and they shouldn't get an EV discount for the subsidies that was going to them, since that $7,500 is going to be ending in September. Okay, well, are you not concerned or still denying the impact of gasoline vehicles in our society? The carbon footprint that we're doing? Me personally, I still have range anxiety, where sometimes I plan for a lot of things, but there's a lot of times where I just want to get up and go, be out and about. So that's why I haven't gotten an electric car. Am I faulting anyone who does? No. I can't stand Musk, but that ain't a new thing. But that don't tell me nothing about you just because you drive a Tesla. Because there could be a lot of reasons why. You could be uninformed and rather have an electric car than a car made by somebody who wasn't a piece of shit. You know, brand history matters to me. And I ain't gonna go off on a tangent, but there's so many companies linked to nonsense that I think if a lot of people actually knew the origin of some of these companies, especially ones that ain't messing with orange face, that walk around here with morals, you'd be surprised. You know, you'd really be surprised at the background and history of a lot of these companies. There's so many of them that are tied to some of the worst human atrocities that have ever happened. And consumers are lining up. Some know, but a large portion don't. Because it's not important. When they go look at something on the shelf or they're thinking about merchandise, the origin is not important. You know, they just want that product. And, you know, I'm not on some soapbox where I can tell you what to do. Because frankly, I don't care what you do in your life, as long as it ain't negatively affecting me. Just like nobody should care what I do unless I'm negatively affecting you. Because you either part of the problem or you part of the solution. But it ain't my job to police the world. I'm just sharing some thoughts. Some people agree, some people don't, and that's all good. I'm open to the comments and all that. You know, I've been seeing them from people on here, and this wasn't the purpose of to start fights with people online or anything like that. But the responses that you get from people, it's easy to shut all that down. Because the minute they start saying this same lame old bullshit, I know where you got it from. I know you got it from Orange Face and his cronies, that you watching Fox News, that you watching Newsmax, that you watching One America, and that you be listening to the dumbest people out there with propaganda and just bullshit. You know how many people tell me that Biden let in 21 million illegals? That's a goddamn lie. The federal data says it was around 11. But 2021 sounds better than 11. And that doesn't go to talk about the expedited removal of them that a lot of them had. Because ultimately, I'm sure there are some that thought they would slide through. But when it comes to criminals, I don't think they go into the border presenting themselves. I don't think, you know, these so-called cartel killers and these gang members, yeah, some of them are going there possibly trying to lie. But on the most part, those aren't the ones that are at the border presenting themselves where they're getting these numbers and multiplying them from. And as much as they talked about how Trump handled immigration, you had millions and millions of people coming through too. And the reason why your numbers were low for the periods of time they were is because the border was shut down due to COVID. So when you make COVID adjustments and things, it's not like he's handling stuff way better than the Democrats. So there's so much misinformation, but ultimately what a lot of people tend to do is that if you want to believe something, Because it's not you believe something. It's if you want to believe something, you're going to search through resources and avenues until you find something that suits your needs, that fits your way of thought, that goes along with what you want to believe. I try to the best of my ability to fact check and look for neutral avenues to get information and consider all information false until I can confirm it. And that's how, I'm realizing that not a lot of people do that. They get it and run with it. So they repeat a lie, and that's how it's like the old game telephone, where you heard some bullshit, but since you like that bullshit, you keep repeating it. And that's why you look at a lot of these maggots have the same exact arguments. And it's crazy because it don't even make sense. It's like, is your mouth jealous of your ass because all the shit coming out of it? Like, really? Bet your ass is jealous from all the shit coming out your mouth because it made no sense. Then you look at, some of the other cuts that were supposed to happen. They're not really cuts because you're not saving money. You look at this Medicaid where if you let them tell it, everybody on Medicaid is fraud. All of them could work and they're committing fraud. Then why aren't you investigating these Medicaid cases and taking action on a case-by-case basis? To blanketly kick off people is horrible, inhumane, and heartless, especially when it comes down to deferring a lot of this money to the wealthy. Are you going to lower what you collect for Medicare out of people's payroll? You're not going to lower that. So as you've cut all this money out of it, you're still collecting the same amount from employees that work, payroll shit. So are they going to pay less since it's like you go into a bank, you've just taken out larger withdrawals. So the people depositing money still got to deposit the same amount of money? So it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. And you're going to see the effects of this right now. You're already seeing them. Because you got so many states where they're on the brink of bankruptcy in the next 6 months to a year. And without this federal money, you are going to see highly damaged communities without the medical care. The SNAP, where handled on a case-by-case basis. I've never been against people going out there and working when you're an able-bodied person who can work. Everybody in this society has met somebody or knows somebody that you could work, but you're not for whatever reason. And the main one is you getting this money so you know you don't have to work. But that's not the overwhelming majority. So I've always felt, why don't you hire more people for enforcement? Investigate these claims on a case-by-case basis. And if you find that somebody is an able-bodied person on a case-by-case basis that has provided enough resources to where they should be able to work, help them get employment. And if they're making a conscious effort to not contribute and work, after you've determined you meet the criteria where we don't see any hindrances or hurdles that should stop you from working, then you take action. But to initiate this collective punishment like you've done is terrible. To hold up money in the school lunches, food banks that are not going to have food, it's not about anything other than you guys don't care about poor people. You don't care about middle class, because the middle class shelters the burden of funding this country anyway. The rich, they don't pay. They pay some, but on average, the wealthiest people, they pay usually around 16%. But when you adjust to some of the other deductions that they're able to take, It's how stuff is taxed. Like, I don't know if anybody out there has heard of the buy, borrow, die strategy. And one of the things that that's what allows you. And I'm gonna read you this article that I did verify with a few different sources where it shows that the top 25 billionaires saw their wealth grow by 401 billion from 2014 to 2018, but they paid just 13.6 billion in federal income taxes. So that's an effective rate of 3.4%. Now, 3.4% is a figure that really stung when you look at what we're paying in taxes. But the thing is, they're paying what their legal obligation is. So it's not like you cheated the government. You paid what your legal obligation was. But where the difference is how you're able to account for your taxable income and how you can lower that. And what it does is see a lot of rich people, especially the ultra wealthy, they basically can borrow money against their stock holdings and live off those loans and then pass their assets on to their heirs, largely tax-free when they die. So meanwhile, regular people like you and I can't defer taxes on our paychecks or borrow against our retirement accounts without a major penalty. So people always say, well, why do these rich people have home loans when you can just buy your stuff outright? You talk about that, what was it, $50 or $100 million place that Jay-Z and Beyonce bought, and they have a loan. People said, well, you're supposed to be billionaires and all that, so why you got a loan? Because what they do is they go get a loan against their assets, and you can borrow against it interest-free, and a lot of times tax-free. A lot of these wealthy, you buy a gang of stocks and things. Like these billionaires, they're not, Elon Musk don't got 400 billion in the bank account. He has stocks, equity, and other things, bonds and things that he can leverage to get loans, which lowers your tax liability because you can write these off. If you have a 401k or an IRA or anything like that, if you borrow out of that, you're going to get hit with penalties and higher tax rates. They don't have to do that. So the government is set up to favor the rich. So what they're doing is there's tax havens that they can get that the middle class and the lower class can't get. And that's just a fact. So there's no way in hell that somebody who's supposed to be making billions of dollars should be paying 6%. But somebody who made 200 or made 150, if you're an individual, should be paying in the high 20s? Because the top federal tax percentage for, I believe, I have to double check that, but I think if you're making $1 million or more, it's 37%, but they're getting away with 16% on average, and sometimes as low as 3.4%. And you have some of these changes where now you've increased the deductions for the rich. These dudes can now write off all kinds of shit, 100%. So yachts and all that, you can write off, get a bigger yacht, because you can write it off 100%. So these tangible goods that only the luxury can afford, you're now going to be able to write those off 100%. Versus the general public cannot. We're talking about crippling debt for this country. And all that's going to result in is more expensive goods and eventually higher tax rates if you get to a point where they actually want to start trying to pay down some of it, which if you looked at the fine print, a lot of this stuff don't start till after the midterms, and the stuff that is starting in the next month or two, they're all ending in 2028 after he's out of office. So he's basically done all this shit, and then he's gonna take his ball and go home. Or excuse me, he's gonna take his plane and go home. So I know the bill passed, but y'all need to read it so y'all can prepare. Y'all need to be able to prepare or at least know what's coming. I read this book and it basically talked about if you knew the atomic bomb was going to drop on you, would you want to know in advance? Some people were like, nope, because I don't want it to affect my life negatively until it happens. Since when it happens, I can't do nothing about it. One other perspective was, I want to know what's coming because it helps me prepare whether I can stop it or not. So depending on where you stand or feel on that, You got to know your enemy, and this bill and this administration is the enemy. So y'all need to read it. Ask AI. If you don't want to read it, it's a long bill, but you can ask any of the AI services you like to give you a breakdown of it, where it's going to talk to you about the positives and the negatives. Because there were so many that you can't even mention all of them. Like, you look at, I'll give you just a brief breakdown of everything on this, especially when you look at, you lied about no taxes on Social Security. You snuck in 300 million that you snuck in so you could go play golf. And I'll touch on that, at another time. You increased ICE's budget from 3.4 billion to 45 billion. The consolidation of the judicial branches, because that's what criminals do. Criminals want to eliminate anybody or any entity that could challenge their illegal activity. So that's what he's done. You've gutted the Labor Department because you've always been anti-union. I can't understand why I saw all these union people standing there cheering. You hate unions. You've always hated unions. So why union people voted for you, I don't know why you did that either. I don't know why law enforcement voted for you, because since when did law enforcement side with the criminals? Unless you a dirty cop, you want to take? Military, I don't know why anybody in the military sided with you. The way you spoke of veterans, the way you talk about them, and you a draft dodger, I don't get it.